What's good, YouTube? And welcome to the house. One of the most asked questions from my live streams to the DMs is, John, what's a cheap undervalue card that I can get right now that's gonna go up in price? Well, if we knew the answer to that, it would already be going up in price. A simple reveal from the OCG on cards that we haven't even decided are good or not, meta relevant or super rogue table 500 causes price spikes. So what do you think people would do if they caught wind of a card that has potential that will go up? So today, I'm actually going to answer that question on cards that I think are undervalued with my player brain, and you will learn that player brain doesn't necessarily mean market brain when it comes to cards like this. And I don't want a green baboon where I show you a card for the collector market, which I knew would happen when I showed it. So I'm going to show a variety, a huge amount of examples of cards that I think are undervalued that won't necessarily be meta impacting anytime soon, but are cards that I would be taking out of bulk, I would be keeping, I would not be just giving away if I could help it. So the first one is Dragon's Spine, and this card reads, activate this card by targeting one dragon type monster you control with 2500 or less attack and defense. Neither player can special summon monsters with attack less than or equal to the original attack of that monster. When this monster leaves the field, destroy this card. So all you have to do is keep that monster afloat, and you've got a floodgate that is Vanity's Emptiness. This is not just the extra deck, it stops the opponent. And dragons are one of the most powerful typings, in fact Dragon Link being one of the top recent decks. So this is a card that I think is heavily underlooked, but it gets outed by cards like Pankratops and now Alpha, being that you have to target a monster with 2500 or less attack and defense, and it also will only apply to the original attack. It has its weaknesses, which is why it never took off. Magic Deflector is one that blows my mind, that's gone up several times. There's only 2 printings of this, and a lot of these cards only have a few printings. For the rest of this turn, negate all, equip, field, continuous, and quick play spell cards on the field. And with Infernoble Knights going out, I think this was seeing some tech in the format. The super rares were actually starting to go off the market, very few, and then there's only the common. This is a turn-long floodgate against so many amazing types of spells in the game, yet it has only seen play, and nichely so, in a couple of metagames, but I really like this card as one that I would hold on to. Protector of the Sanctuary. Your opponent cannot draw cards except during the draw phase. I think this only has 3 printings, 2 being very hard from like Dark Beginnings or Revelations, then a champion pack in its original. So this card that has seen memes in terms of being summoned back and, you know, interrupting the opponent, but this actually even turns off Max C. The specific wording draw, though, a lot of decks don't care to draw, they search. So over time, this definitely has its problems versus how a lot of decks go these days, but still one that I keep in the back of my mind. Then I like engines. I like engines a lot, such as Fire King Island, and how this would get played with Cosmos and other decks. This is one that I still pull out of bulk anytime I see it. I think it has a really high potential depending on card creation within the game, and it's one I set aside. I don't want to sell this for 2 pennies. I would rather sell this for dollars somewhere down the line when it has interactions with other decks, but you're waiting. Think about the opportunity cost of money you would sink into, whereas you pick this out of bulk, pretty much free, and even those 2 cents is still an opportunity cost where those 2 cents could go otherwise. I like the Symphonic Engine, despite you having to pitch a card and having multiple places this gets choked out by Veiler, Imperm, Ash Blossom, so many different hand traps where this goes wrong, but the offer of a monster on the field and additional summons, I just can't resist. I pull this out of bulk every time. Blaze Accelerator Reload. This is not for you, Pain. This is actually because we saw this as recent in history as Paleozoics, with having this played into the deck and doing really good. You can just Foolish Burial Goods this at any time and have an on-board Regeki wipe of your opponent's stuff anytime online just by having this in your graveyard. So really amazing card in my opinion. Eater of Millions is one I've suggested on Penny Stonks a couple times, I think. It has a holo version, it has commons, and with Eater of Millions, it is non-targeting removal. It does depend on the battle phase, and it also can get super beefy, but it costs your extra deck, and a lot of other cards nowadays, such as Pot of Extravagance, and a new one on the horizon will cost your extra deck cards. So those resources are far and few between, depending on the engines and decks and cards you're playing, and I do still still think Eater of Millions will see its way back into metagames. We saw it with Grin Maju, and I was like, yeah, that's my boy, Hungry Boy, going in. I like this card a lot. I've even made it a channel emote. Mausoleum of the Emperor is a super unique field spell. Says during any main phase, the turn player can pay 1,000 life points times the number of monsters normally needed for the tribute summon of a monster. That player normal summon / sets monsters without tributing. This is their one normal summon / set for the turn. It is not a tribute summon. Very specific wording, but it lets you cheat out things like Vanity's Fiend, Majesty's Fiend, and get really annoying stun decks online, and there's something this could work out perfectly with in the future, depending on what decks need their normal summons for the engines and what other cards are out there. I love these kinds of cards, by the way, that are coming up. Puppet Plant, Marionette Mite, and Electric Virus are all essentially mind control, but for specific kinds of cards. But as you read it, you take control of the target till the end phase, then can do anything with it. Yes, you can attack, you can go in, and these are some of the best typing ones. Warriors and Spellcasters, you get Fiends and Zombies, Machines or Dragons. Not sure how those two went together, but, you know, they had to fill out all the typings. I like these cards, I set them aside, they get talk once in a while, and while we have Triple Tactics talent right now, that is a card that people discuss around, will that ever see the ban list? And these kinds of cards, they don't require your opponent to do something in order to get that yoink, and you can do whatever you want with those cards you're taking. Speaking of engines again, Bow Baboon's a card I love. Metal Foes are looking like they might come back a little bit. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can draw a card, then place a card from your hand on either the top or bottom of the deck. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon any number of Bow Baboons. And wow, there's not a hard once per turn on this, is there? It's if it's normal or special, you do it again and again. I like saying again like that, like the Canadian brethren. But seriously, I love Bow Baboon. I really think he's awesome and a bit underestimated. I like cards like these two enablers, which are Call of the Mummy. You're able to special summon a zombie if you have none on the field. Water Hazard for water monsters. So instead of a typing, you get an attribute. And then Valhalla for fairies, which actually has a searcher unlike the others in Hecatrice. So I do like cards like these. They don't necessarily pan out too well, although Valhalla's had a couple of hype moments. So hype rather than results. They're still enablers that I like to see, and Valhalla has the most going for it. Recover and Frankenderp. I love looking at psychic monsters that are just so generically good. Frankenderp was in Synchro Loop decks. I take note. If this card's normal or special summoned, you pay 500 life points, you look at the top card of your deck, and you can place it on the bottom of your deck, or reveal it and add it to your hand, but you skip the next draw phase. Wow. Well, in Yu-Gi-Oh!, sometimes all you need is the one turn to set up your board, take out the opponent. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is often played in one turn, and this insane psychic enabler, pretty good, and it's on normal or special. Recover is a card that if this card's in the graveyard, your opponent has 5 or more cards in their extra deck than you do. You pay 2,000, you special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. So you can use it off of E-Tully. It's an Earth Tuner as well, which is important for certain Floodgate-like monsters that I also love to grab onto, like Naturia Beast. And yeah, it's a decent recover monster. Mare is a card that ends up in engines like Tenyi, and recently did have its stunt within the metagame. And when I say recently, last couple of years, but I do like Mare, and I think it gets underestimated from time and time again. People stop paying attention, they start sleeping on it, goes down in price, then it becomes relevant somewhere again. One of the only cards to have the wording thrice per turn on a really cool effect. I like Vishuda a lot. People kind of looking away from this one. It was very recently relevant. Well, again, in a couple of years. Whenever I look at cards like this and I say recently, like, to have a win on these kinds of cards, when you invest in them or have piles, it can take years and years. You're in for the long term with stuff like that. That's why I don't go, oh yes, the secret recipe for success. Yes. It's no, you're going to be holding on. You're going to be waiting. You're going to be chilling on these cards for a long time in hopes that support comes out that breaks them. And a good example actually is Gigantus. I've always loved pulling out these kinds of cards that special summon themselves by banishing a monster. Now you have a dark one as well. Garuda is one I have my eyes on for Dragoonides because it is a winged beast. Level 4 wind fitting perfectly in there. And you actually have a second wind option in Sutff, which is a fairy. But yeah, Garuda is kind of one to keep an eye on. There's not a lot of versions of some of these cards, and they've gone up in price before and have become recently relevant. And as the game goes on, you get hungry for extenders, especially level 4s, one of the best levels in the games. These cards are ones to look out for, and I really am a little proud on calling stuff like this and seeing it pan out, even after I quit vending. It took that long, imagine. It took from, like, Gigantus wasn't played since, like, 2005-06, and it took all that time, but it still panned out. The deck devs and other cards like that, I'm avoiding the last word because of the time we're in, but seriously, YouTube, get that algorithm together. I love cards like this as well that can just destroy opponent strategies, and the strongest of them, the Crush card, had to be eroded. Cards like this still exist that are at their full power, just waiting for their format. And finally, into the extra deck, just a couple cards. Coach King Giant Trainer is one that actually people start considering here or there again in recent history, but it's been a long time since he's been meta relevant. And when you look at him, there's not a once per turn. You detach a material, draw a card, show it, then if it's a monster, inflict 800 damage to your opponent. You don't get a battle phase the turn you use the effect, but man, this card's good. It really is. And then Cloud Castle, people have definitely caught on this format with good old Calamities, and we're seeing people teching Cloud Castle, use Cloud Castle as that extender in order to go Calamities, oftentimes needing to link things off or just go for it. It's a really awesome card. It's been a long time coming, and it's found its place into being played. So these are all kinds of cards that I look for in bulk or even on market if they are cheap enough, but typically I don't want to be paying because the putting actual cash in for these versus what they are, while you might go and read this for the first time and be like, whoa, my mind's blown, that card's amazing, and this or that or could do this. They're sitting there. They're waiting for their time. The time isn't necessarily now, or it becomes now after years and years and years. So you don't want to just dump money into cards like these. You want to gradually get them. But yes, there are tons of cards that are underestimated, forgotten engines, things that people let go by the wayside that they've paid $20 for before when it comes to certain things. And while they've got more versions, you bet those meta players like their highest rarity versions, and those have gotten cheaper over time too. Thanks for watching today's video. What did you think of the discussion and going through past forgotten crazy engines that did so good and cards with that latent potential? I love bringing those kinds of conversations to the forefront, along with the great forewarning that don't just throw your money at the screen, guys. I'm incentivized to tell you to do that using that TCG player link in the description down below, costing you nothing extra to support the channel directly for the cards you'd already be buying. And I'm still telling you, take your time, get them slowly, don't freaking overspend on stuff like this.